Hi everyone, welcome to episode 14 of the Expert League. My name is Cindy Yu and I'm the National Welfare Manager here at Outside the Locker Room. Today we have another special edition of the Expert League around Women's Health Week, which runs from September the 7th to the 11th. And this year, during these unprecedented times, it's a great opportunity for us to focus on the health of the women around us, such as our mums, our sisters, our girlfriends, our wives, our aunties, and our daughters. And if you're a woman yourself, we encourage you to take time for yourself and also connect with the women around you. Today, I'm thrilled to have a world-renowned expert in the field of women's mental health joining me today. Professor Jayashri Kulkarni from Melbourne. And Jayashri is a Professor of Psychiatry at the Alfred Hospital and at Monash University. And she is the Director of the Monash Alfred Psychiatry Research Centre, which is also where I personally had the privilege of working for Jayashri earlier in my career. Jayashri conducts groundbreaking clinical research in the field of women's mental health and is internationally acknowledged as a leader in the field, in particular for her innovative work on reproductive hormones and mental illness. And in 2019, Jayashri received the prestigious Order of Australia for her services to psychiatry. So I'm really thrilled to have such an amazing leader in the field of women's mental health joining me today. And I can't wait to share our conversation where we talk about how we can support the women around us as well as look after ourselves. And so I hope you enjoy. And if you yourself does need support during this time, please reach out to us and our welfare team via our website or social media, or you can email us directly at welfare@otlr.org.au. Just to note that this interview may contain some references to severe mental health. And so if you are struggling, please call Lifeline on 131114. And in an emergency, always contact 000. Thanks for watching. Jayashri, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm absolutely thrilled and honoured to have you joining me. Thank you so much for your time. I've just given the audience a bit of a background of your incredibly invaluable and innovative work in the field of women's mental health. And you also received an Order of Australia last year, and that must have been quite a memorable moment.
It's an absolute thrill and an honour. And it's incredible because it's a lot of people who have worked in this field, so I'm part of a team, but it was lovely to get recognised. So, yeah, just thrilled.
Yeah, that would have been great. And so I'd love to hear what drove you to be such a passionate and dedicated leader in the area of women's mental health.
So I think my interest in women's mental health began when I was a registrar or a training psychiatrist, particularly when I did a rotation at the old Royal Park Hospital, which is no longer a hospital. But back in the day, I was asked to look after what was called the back ward, so people who had been there for a very long time, and it was the women's ward. And so as a young trainee in psychiatry, I got to work with a number of women who unfortunately had been in hospital, and back then, you know, that was 10, 15 years length of stay, which was dreadful. But what I learnt from speaking with the women in that particular ward was a whole range of things. And in particular, I was quite shocked at the fact that there hadn't been a lot of interest or work or research done specifically on women's mental health. And I think some of the comments by the women themselves, like there were a number of women there who had been perfectly well until they'd had a child and then had developed postnatal depression or psychosis, and it had just never gone away. And that really, you know, ended up ruining not only their life, but their family's life as well. And I thought we really need to do better. And that started me reading and thinking about how we could make women's mental health improved. And that's been a lifelong career choice. And I still very much appreciate and get a lot of information and important directions from women themselves who've experienced and are experiencing mental ill health to kind of point the way as to where the research should go.
Amazing. And I personally have seen you make such a huge impact and difference on women's life. And you are such a person-centered and caring psychiatrist. And we're so grateful for all the incredible work that you've done in the field. We wouldn't be where we are today without you. So thank you so much for that. And so what current research are you focusing on at the moment?
So there's several things going on, but I think as I've gone through more and more working with women who have mental ill health, the correlation between the connection between trauma that is experienced by women, particularly in early life, and then the impact that that has on the brain and the impact that it has on hormones, in particular the estrogen, progesterone, reproductive hormones, is really critical. And it's not something that has been focused on particularly well or particularly in a way that makes for new treatments. So I am working on thinking about new treatments forward for conditions that have been traditionally relegated to it's just a personality disorder, you know, she's just behaving badly, deliberate self-harm, well, you know, that's not really suicide, she could do better if she tried harder. That's all junk. And really, it's important that when we think about, in many times, the patients that I see, the women I see in our clinic, the level of distress and trauma that has happened in their early life and how that's expressed in both a brain and biology sense can point the way to then using that particular strategy to move forward. So, for example, we're working at the moment on PMDD. This is premenstrual depression. So many women experience a milder form called premenstrual syndrome, PMS, but this is the very severe form of depression that many, about 15 to 20% of reproductive age women experience. And they really get incapacitated for about a week to 10 days every cycle. And that's a lot of time to lose. So when we've been working in this particular area, what we've been looking at is trying to think about new hormone strategies that might help the women who experience this dreadful depression, rather than going down a standard antidepressant strategy. We certainly recommend looking at lifestyle. We recommend looking at exercise. We also recommend looking at hormone strategies to improve the whole health and general health. And to come back to what I was just talking about, we also take a strong trauma history to understand a bit more about what was going on in this person's life that has led to a whole bunch of events that have unfortunately ended with mental ill health. So it's trying to develop a holistic approach to women's mental health, both in the understanding and in the development of new treatments, and certainly in the delivery of services that are women-focused and holistic.
And yeah, you definitely sound like you do a really holistic approach in terms of working with these women, and you're really improving their quality of life.
We're trying. I can't say that we've got there yet, but we are making definite strides in that direction. And for those of you who don't know, Cindy worked in the clinic as coordinator of the clinic, and my gosh, she was a gun. She could run everything single-handed and was just brilliant at being able to speak with women on the phone, and the interactions clinically start there. So we miss you very much, Cindy.
Thanks, Jayashri. I definitely miss working with you, and I miss all the women that come through the clinic. Hopefully one day I'll be joining you again. And so, yeah, you spoke about PMDD and postnatal depression. Are there any other mental health conditions that disproportionately affect women, and why is it?
Well, in actual fact, all of the mental health conditions pretty much disproportionately affect women. The depression ratios are 2 to 1, so twice as many women experience depression in their lifetime compared to men. 4 times as many women experience anxiety compared to men. And PTSD is part of anxiety. So again, you pick any disorder. Possibly the only disorder is the addiction disorders, although unfortunately women are catching up to men with alcohol and drug abuse. So even in that area, which was a male dominant condition, unfortunately women are catching up. So if we look at any disorder, women experience most mental ill health conditions disproportionately more than men. So 2 to 1 with depression. Women are twice as more affected by depression. And there's a 4 to 1 ratio with anxiety disorders. So women experience anxiety 4 times more than men. So in all of those conditions, women do experience the problems, the mental ill health problems, much more. You know, in physical health, there are some attempts to look at the how does heart disease affect women and how does heart disease affect men, for example. But in mental health, we haven't really looked at that. So it's really important to think about the sex and gender of the individual and how that impacts the presentation as well as the ongoing symptoms and then also the treatment. So it is critical that gender and sex play a role, and women are unfortunately experiencing mental ill health more. So you asked why? Well, I think it's best to take a biopsychosocial approach, and by that I mean there are biological factors. So that includes the hormone factors, it includes the neural networks, it includes genetic factors, all the biology. And then there are psychological and social factors. The social factors include violence against women, difficulties and inequities in salaries, in power ratios, in cultural standing of women. And some cultures, unfortunately, treat women as if they're second-class citizens. And then psychologically, women have different defence or coping mechanisms for different conditions. So you put the whole lot together, and it does mean that there is a greater vulnerability for mental ill health in women compared to men.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of compounding factors, and it's great that you look at all the different avenues that can affect women, and it is unfortunate that women are disproportionately affected with mental health disorders. So what services and resources exist that are tailored for women?
Well, I'd love to say that there's a whole heap of services and resources, but there really isn't specific ones once you leave the pregnancy related services. So yeah, some good ones, you know, like PANDA is a particularly good one for perinatal anxiety and depression. Certainly Lifeline is a resource for all. Jean Hale's foundation works with women, and particularly in the menopause, but other areas of health, but not specifically mental health, but you know, works for women in that whole area. Different hospitals may have clinics that are set up for, again, usually perinatal clinics. But by and large, the Women's Mental Health Clinic that we run at the Monash Alfred Psychiatry Research Centre is really the only general women's mental health clinic that is there for women's mental health in a broad sense, which is really sad that it's the main public hospital service that's available at this point.
Yeah, and it's such a needed service. I know myself working there that the waiting list and the women that do want to come through are quite incredible. So it's great that you've created such an amazing and meaningful clinic for these women, and hopefully that we can replicate this around the country and even around the world in the future.
Yes, that's exactly the aim.
And so at the moment we are going through, you know, quite a difficult phase at the moment. So what can women do to look after their own mental health and well-being during this time?
So unfortunately, what were all the results of surveys, and MAPRC, Monash Alfred Psychiatry Research Centre, has been running our own survey, and all the data from our survey and others show that women are experiencing a greater degree of anxiety at this point, and that is across all age groups. It's not just young women; it's also women of different age groups. So there are several things that can help. And certainly the sorts of important things include a number of activities that are possible to do in isolation or lockdown. The importance of sharing responsibilities for child education. So with the home education processes, a number of women have said they feel that they're doing most of the work here, and that creates an extra load of tension, work, and difficult. It's a very difficult job to be suddenly turned into teacher as well as parent. So that sharing that responsibility is critical. Sharing responsibility for household work is also important, and unfortunately, the last survey, the Hilda survey, which is a health and labour division survey that was industry and labour division that was done and released last year, showed that women were still doing a large amount of the household work, and that of course is accelerated when everybody's in lockdown and everybody's living in a household. So suddenly the household chores can increase, and it is important to have delegation and discussion about all of that. Some of the anxiety that we're seeing is about new anxieties. So in particular, concerns about the impact of the virus in our elderly women who are at greater risk of infection, who are also at greater risk of mental ill health as a result of that. What we're suggesting people do is take in enough information that they are informed, but to limit the amount of media access on the topic to less than 4 hours. Now, why 4 hours? That was what we found on our survey, that greater than 4 hours of media consumption about information to do with COVID, in fact, led to a greater degree of anxiety and subsequent depression. So you need to be informed, but not absolutely sort of over-consumed by it all. Setting up routines is always important, and so for women who are trying to work from home as well as trying to conduct a household, keep it running, and also with children, it is important to set up routines. So again, to designate certain hours in the day as the work day, and certain hours as family time, and then don't forget me time as well. So that's the other critical part about it. And a big warning about not overdoing the alcohol. The other part of the survey data shows that women are in fact increasing alcohol consumption in particular, and that has been an issue that is increasing in second lockdown as well as was an issue in first lockdown. And of course we understand that people are stressed, and it is an easy reach, but it's a very negative response because of the physical health problems as well as the mental health down aspects of alcohol intoxication and addiction. So that'd be some of the things I'd suggest that people can do right now.
Yeah, really great advice, and really important points that you make there about delegating some tasks and creating structure and routine, and really reducing the alcohol consumption. And so if we are, let's say, the partner or the children or the parents of women, how can we support them in achieving these?
Yeah, so it's always a really important aspect to think about the whole network. And sometimes what's happened in the way we exist in a nuclear family is that there has been an increasing alienation or cut-offness from our neighbourhood networks, but also our extended family and friends networks. And this is a time to actually reactivate those networks. And yes, we can't go and visit people in face-to-face mode, but there are a lot of ways to keep in touch. And inside the house, it's really important to set up communication time where it is about having a frank dialogue about how you're feeling, not about then again rehashing points of antagonism and therefore kind of having ongoing disputes, but to actually have some half hour or so of how are you going and this is how I'm going, and have that discussion with family members. That way, if there are things that are not going well, they may be able to be expressed in a much more constructive manner so that instead of having another brawl or fight about it, it can actually be resolved in a calm way. And if you set up a time on a regular basis, it means that you don't have to wait till things reach a critical point and there's sort of this brewing negativity about things, and then all of a sudden it erupts and then it's uncontrolled. So a controlled and, if you like, timetabled communication strategy with family and friends is really critical. And then keeping the networks going with family and friends via Zoom or via one of the communication type of things, conversations via text, even phone calls. We have a few different telecommunication methods, so it'd be good to use to stay in touch with people, because the more connected we are, the less the alienation feeling. So isolation doesn't have to mean alienation. They're two separate phenomena. We are in enforced isolation, but we don't have to be in alienation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of creating that time, that structure, you know, whether it be once a day, once a week, where you can speak to each other quite frankly, and you have that space. And one of OTLR's values is community. So really reaching out, connecting with one another and keeping those networks alive. Even though we might be physically isolated, we don't need to be socially isolated. So thank you so much for your really great advice, incredible knowledge that you shared with us today. Do you have any final words or final advice for the audience at home?
Oh, I think we've covered a fair bit of ground, and I do thank you very much, Cindy, for all the hard work that you and your colleagues are doing. I think it's wonderful to have programs like this that actually can reach quite a large audience and make a big difference. And I wish you every safety and personal success. I wish all of your listeners and viewers every success, but stay safe, everybody out there, and all the best.
Thanks, Jayashri. And if anyone wants to get in contact with you and your team at MapRC, can they do so, and how can they do that?
Yes, so if they want to contact us for more information, they can contact the MapRC reception, which is maprc at monash.edu.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really, really appreciate your time. You're such an incredible leader in the field, and I had such a privilege of working with you, and I really hope that we can continue working together down the track. So take care, and I'm wishing you all the best. Bye, Jay.
Bye-bye.